Early access survival hardcore is essentially a sleeper agent activation phrase that makes any gamer on the planet mash the do not recommend button on Steam. Many games that release into early access attempt their ascent to glory with a half-baked, underdeveloped game that only really moves units because their favourite streamer is playing it, not because it has any real redeeming qualities. The early access survival trap is the sale of a promise that one day a good game with few bugs, a great gameplay loop, and something worth the asking price will exist in place of the cobbled together mess that exists now. Where did this all start? And why do these games keep getting made, just so that they can die and be forgotten? Well, what if I told you this wasn't always the case? And that once upon a time, Steam wasn't rife with incomplete Kickstarter rejects and shovelware. But that means we gotta take it back. How about we take it back to 2010, 12 years into the past, to remember where we were, so that we can figure out where we're headed. A lot of good games released at the end of the 2000s, and the trends of first-person shooter games were more or less dictated by every Call of Duty entry, though Halo stood true to itself without copying everything that Call of Duty was doing. The surprising thing that some of you might not remember is that MOBAs were the gaming trend that preceded the survival game trend. Every single company wanted a game that could compete with, or completely overrun the would-be titan that is League of Legends. And this is 2 years before Dota 2 would even enter the fray. Esports in 2010 wasn't the beast we know it today, but StarCraft 2 esports is blowing up in North America and Korea, setting the foundation for what esports would become in the future. Oh, and Twitch is still called Justin TV, just in case you wanted to feel really old. The top YouTube channels are mostly comedy, vlogging, and skit related, and gaming isn't the king of YouTube, though it would become the king later in the year. The current Call of Duty is Black Ops, and everyone at school is saying, "What do the numbers mean, Mason?" Mass Effect 2's just released, StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty's come out, Civ 5, Bad Company 2, Fallout New Vegas, Alan Wake, Halo Reach, Red Dead Redemption, Bioshock 2. Those are some of the gaming titans that came out that year. Oh, and the game that fundamentally changed the horror game meta forever, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, yep. The turn of the new decade was absolutely stacked with timeless releases. But with all these big changes releasing all at once, it signaled a paradigm shift was coming. That things weren't going to stay the same for much longer. Minecraft changed everything for gaming. A simple blend of build, break, and survive on a 1x1 block art style was extremely uncommon in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Children, including myself, loved watching and playing it though. Prior to its inception, the majority of popular games were third-person action-adventure games and first-person shooters, as well as choice-driven RPGs such as Mass Effect and Dragon Age. Minecraft was hugely important to my formative years as a younger gamer. I saw that making something of your own game could be its own endgame, a big goal that you aspire to. The interesting thing is that its final chapter is only as limited as your own imagination takes you, and that's an idea I'd already been enjoying a bit with Media Molecule's hit classic Little Big Planet on the PS3. Pre-classic, or the first versions of Minecraft, released back in May of 2009, and by 2011 Minecraft reached 1 million registered accounts, way back when you could pick the game up for just $10. Not 6 months later the game would soar up to 10 million users, and well, I'll let today's numbers speak for themselves in context. The version of Minecraft I started on was classic, but the version I played the most was Alpha, specifically Alpha 1.26. There was no sprint meter or hunger meter, and the night times were fairly difficult to navigate without torches. Simply put, the game was brutal. You'd spawn in, gather resources, build a base, try to mine a cave, and then die, and then you do it again. And the only thing that persisted between each life was the base you left behind, assuming a creeper didn't blow up right outside your base. So why was it so gripping? What was it about Minecraft that changed survival forever? Well, it had a simple gameplay loop of focusing on progressing from one level of minerals to the other. You'd start out punching trees, and by the end you'd be decked out in diamond. Along the way, you'd build a base to store your things so that when you die, if you fell into lava or whatever, you'd still have backup resources that you could rely on. The game distilled the contemporary survival loop down to 4 really simple elements. You spawn in with nothing, you gather items to bolster your resources, And from there, you build to protect your resources, making things such as tools, weapons, expanding a base. And the final thing is that you survive, with the implicit goal of surviving longer than you did previously. This cycle was fundamental in the design of a lot of games from here on out. And I'm not going to go and get into the Minecraft clones because there is millions of them. Just know that it laid the foundations of where gaming was headed next. I'll be honest, I can't tell you what Minecraft is like today. I can only show you that it's clearly the most popular game ever made. Even factoring in things like Fortnite and GTA 5, the numbers speak for themselves. Minecraft is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's just complete. It's the one game that you pay for and it can bring you closer to your friends. It lets you relax and build a home, a farm. You can mod the hell out of it to make it into any game that you want. Whether you're more RPG inclined or more hardcore survival inclined, you can make it into anything. Now, it's $1 billion game, and honestly, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. The memories I have from my childhood, as well as the moments I have with friends, those are priceless to me. Surely no game that follows this could have a legacy of its own, right? Well... The most important game that followed Minecraft was a mod for a 2009 military simulator called Arma II, specifically for its Operation Arrowhead expansion. The mod created on it is known as the infamous DayZ Mod, which changed survival for years to come. DayZ Mod released in 2012 by an ex-military game developer named Dean Rocket Hall. After being injured during a joint training exercise while in the New Zealand Army, Rocket went on to develop a gameplay experience that pinned down the underlying tension and emotion that was intrinsic to military operations. The brutal difficulty of playing it on a very janky, although functional military simulator made it an immediate classic amongst hardcore survival gamers, despite the game never really running above 30 frames per second, or at least at any serviceable frame rate by today's standards. It was prone to numerous bugs, and that didn't stop it from being popular when it was in its prime. DayZ Mod Vanilla, or Unmodded as it was known, was a game that spawned you in a completely random section of the map, generally along the coastline, whether it was all the way northeast or southwest, without an inkling of a tutorial or guide as to how you're supposed to play the game. The basic premise was to satisfy your basic needs: hunger, thirst, keeping your blood, which is health, above a certain level, and avoiding wounds such as broken bones and infections. The world was riddled with annoying yet ultimately useless zombies, and rarely did I ever die to them as a teenager, because they were coded to walk extremely slowly once they got inside buildings. Still, the zombies were a nice touch. In Minecraft they were fairly annoying and they could get you killed, but in DayZ they were more like obstacles in your path to kind of stop you from looting as easily. The destroyed setting of Chernarus was a desolate and broken world, devoid of human life, and the people that were still around were generally out to kill you. Building and crafting mechanics did appear later in DayZ Mod's lifetime, but it was never really the fundamental reason people played the vanilla mod, the same way that crafting and building were defining features of Minecraft. Where DayZ departs from Minecraft is player interaction. There was a reputation system called humanity, where healing and helping players gave you more humanity, and killing players who had humanity above 0 was considered banditry. Killing on sight was the way that many people chose to play. When you begin in DayZ, you have a thing called humanity, and you have a certain amount of it. If you kill enough innocent players that are not bandits, your humanity will continue to plummet. Plummet low enough and you'll turn into a bandit, indicating to other players that, hey, this person tends to kill innocents. Conversely, if you help people enough, you'll turn into a hero, indicating to other people that you tend to help and heal other players. Player interaction didn't necessarily have to involve killing. Some people were just looking to interact and make friends, and this is what really defines survival to this day. From player interaction, two sides of the same coin were born. PvP, which generally involves killing people the moment you see them, and then cooperation, where you spend your time in the game actually trying to help others and survive together. The cooperation aspect of survival existed in Minecraft, but Arma 2 had a critical feature that Minecraft and most other games didn't: voice chat. The humanities system employed by DayZ was not a new feature to gaming at all. Old school sandbox MMORPGs such as Ultima Online from 1997 featured a criminal system that had players flagged if they broke the law recently. By flagging players as either hero, bandit, or survivors, it left an element of chaos in each player's actions. Surely a player who has the hero skin influences others to think, oh, I can trust this person, and while their friend who is perched up on a hill with a Lee Enfield kills the unwitting freshly spawned player. That doesn't seem as predictable as you thought, does it? Much like the zombie apocalypse writing of the 2010s seen in media such as The Walking Dead or The Last of Us, you couldn't reliably predict how people would act when they run into other people. Similarly, there's a great amount of people who would gradually become more and more hostile as they trust and get betrayed and repeat that cycle over and over. They would gradually turn into that thing that they swore they would never be. Amongst my friends, half of us had the bandit costume, but I managed to keep the survivor skin because I was generally only killing bandits on sight. But between the four of us, we would act as friendlies one day, and bandits who kill on sight another. Regardless of whether we wanted to be friendly or be bandits, one thing remained constant: the desire to create a narrative. Whether it was getting revenge on the guy who betrayed you at the church in Electro, or having an intense skirmish at the Northwest Airfield, every player was looking for a narrative. Future survival games didn't copy the humanity system because it was a limiting factor that wasn't really appropriate for the very open-ended nature of survival games with full loot PvP. They would, however, pay attention to the prevalence of niches or play styles that carved out the average player base and player experience. Vanilla DayZ has the pure feeling of tension and scarcity that underpins a good survival experience. But what it has for a lot of players is really slow pacing that not all gamers have the time for. What DayZ inspired will be covered in a later section, but for now, let's look at one mod I spent many nights playing with all my high school friends. DayZ Epoch is a variation of DayZ that had AI missions and base building, as well as economy mechanics that let people jump straight into the fun without the hour-long looting phase of the game that some people had grown tired of. For example, there was currency given from mission completion, which could then be used as tender at trader cities, which were safe zones where you could buy weapons, cars, loadouts, things like that. Server owners tended to reserve high-tier weapons for missions only, but it really worked on a case-by-case basis based on the preferences of that owner. Missions generally handed out different things that different groups would be interested in, such as weapon caches, construction materials, armored vehicles, and so on. Epoch impacted player decision making through funneling players to fight one another over limited time missions that appeared on the map, completely stripping out the tension and surprise of basic survival. It kind of boiled the game down to very rudimentary PvP, except with stakes in the form of potential rewards, as well as the gear equipped to their bodies. One consequence of streamlining the gearing process through the prevalence of AI missions was that player interaction was at an all-time low on these servers, because you'd no longer just happen upon some random people doing random things in a random town. No, instead you were pretty much always killed on sight, and the interactions you had were just grudges and rivalries against other clans that existed on the server. That might not be a universal thing, but based on my anecdotal experience, that's how it went down. It's a little bit ironic, because this style of survival is still popular today. You might have heard of a little small indie game known as Rust. Granted, Rust doesn't let you just heavily militarize within minutes of spawning, and they have regular wipes to reset the progression of clans and entrenched groups that are seemingly untouchable. With the growth of Epoch and other mods that spun off from the original DayZ, the nomadic style of vanilla DayZ was becoming more and more optional and less of a necessity. If you wanted to have a more permanent sense of progression with buildings, saves, cars, and you were committed to the clan style of play, mods like Epoch were a great addition because it removed 40 minutes of running around the map in vanilla to meet up with people and then another hour of looting. You kind of just spawned in at a given town and then you could like spawn in a bicycle so you could meet up with one another. If you wanted permanent progression through the form of skills and leveling, there was DayZ Origins, which admittedly I didn't play that much. If you wanted to just jump in and fight, Overwatch had high weapon and vehicle spawns as well as additional weapons and vehicles that weren't in the base DayZ. And some servers ran a mix of Overwatch and Epoch, creating a beast known as Overpoch, which melded together the best features of both. For me, DayZ Mod was at its peak in Epoch, because my friends and I were busy with school, part-time jobs and whatnot, and we didn't want to spend 7 hours a night just trying to have fun. The regularity of missions and the constant PvP that came with them were both enjoyable and memorable. Through those missions, we built rivalries on the servers we played on and made our memories through the clan wars we engaged in against enemy players. I wish I had recordings of those days, because to me, those memories can't be bought in today's gaming market, especially not with how bad the average survival game is. But Epoch was just one niche of survival. It was endgame oriented with currency and base building to give you a sense of permanence, territory control, and that created its own unique and tense experience, one that very few games I would say actually match today besides Rust. Surely, after 2013, something will take its place, right? Well, I must say, this section will be primarily a commentary on the initial releases of early access games, not a reflection of their modern day standing and quality. December 2013 is when the early access survival game plague began. Within days of one another, Steam saw the release of DayZ Standalone, Rust, and 7 Days to Die into early access in December of 2013. It's a bit disrespectful to call them plagues, especially considering DayZ, 7 Days to Die, and Rust have all become really great games, but I don't believe that DayZ and Rust had that great of a beginning. DayZ was barely functional. It was completely embarrassing compared to the Arma 2 mod, and as well as any iterations of it that people fondly remembered. You'd constantly be bombarded with ugly status text. The game felt directionless, even more so than the Arma 2 mod, and it was extremely hardcore in the most obtuse ways. It only served to create player frustration. There was no endgame, no base building, and it had no real point to exist at this point in time other than to cash in on the success of Arma 2 DayZ, which was getting a bit dated by 2013 standards. I distinctly remember hopping in call with my friends and just playing for a few hours before we decided it was done for. And this game was released way too early, it was a cash grab, and we kind of just gave up on DayZ. They promptly swore off survival games for some years to come, and most of them still don't play any to this day. Rust had a similar story. The initial release had zombies and rudimentary base building, and the development was really half-baked for the first release. You weren't really running around as naked cave people like they are now. You spawned in as a soldier. There was a lot of modern-looking weaponry compared to the almost primitive feel of the guns in modern Rust. There were still things like blueprints, researching, crafting, and building, but the package wasn't quite what modern Rust is today. Granted, it was early access, but we were starting to see a new precedent set for survival games where they were barely playable but extremely popular. You could still raid on the game, which is kind of a popular feature on Rust, but you could also disconnect to avoid being full killed, and your body wouldn't just remain logged in the way it does now. Before there was ladders, people would just stack boxes and then climb up the wall of someone's base. And despite what nostalgia will have people say about it, I don't think that Rust in 2013 was that good of a product. What alarmed me about the beginning of the survival era was that I felt like we were in store for something that would never stop. I consider most survival games that have released since 2013 atrocious. The War Z, which released in 2012, not long after the DayZ mod, was one of the earliest DayZ influenced games, and it was completely atrocious. You paid like $30, your characters died and you got put on cooldown and you couldn't play that same character. And you could also pay to have a private server where you could farm your gear up, but then it was like the DayZ Hive where if you had that gear in the private server, you could take it into public and then just kill people. So you could really pay to win by having a private server. Today the game's called Infestation Survivor Stories, I believe, and it's filled with microtransactions and a lot of pay to win garbage. Honestly, what an atrocious game. I don't think a game like Ark is that well optimized, and it's really buggy, janky, and while I think it has like interesting lore and story, I think the game itself is something people just kind of accept. Even though you'll see on Steam there's a lot of players, playing the actual game itself is very, very weird. It's not as fun as it looks, I would say. Atlas is just a cash grab. It's functionally dead based on the size of its community, and I think they were just trying to get a buck out of the community that had their goodwill. And I remember when the game came out, people found files from Ark in the game, so do with that what you will. Conan Exiles is a good game, in my opinion, but it has atrocious monetization. But that's Funcom we're talking about, who, honestly, you can't really be surprised with them in 2022. I mean, I love The Longest Journey and Dreamfall, but that's not the Funcom I know anymore. Like, they just milk their consumers these days. I don't really have any faith in them. Reign of Kings is straight up an abandoned game. So is their newest game, Heat, developed by the same dev, Code Hatch, and you may know them from the infamous Starforge. So if you see a game and it's released by Code Hatch, don't buy it, it's a scam. Life is Feudal was a complete scam, and the MMO that people paid for has reviews from people with up to 7,000 hours calling it a scam. You can't even buy it anymore, and if you could, I would advise against buying it, because as someone who actually bought the game and played it, it was just high concepts and low execution, and I think you needed to pay to play it. And it cost more than Final Fantasy XIV or WoW, so not gonna recommend it. I've named a handful, but there are dozens of bad survival games that release every single year, and they're all failures in the making. They prey on the dream of survival gamers of finding that holy grail game, their own DayZ Epoch that finally gets them and all their friends to settle down and play something long term without the long list of asterisks attached. Whether it's a really buggy engine, such as that of the II DayZ Mod, or it just is optimized like crap like Ark, like there's always something wrong with it. But that's why the lies are so effective. They overpromise something that they cannot feasibly deliver on. And by 2014, Rocket, who invented the DayZ mod, had already left Bohemia to make a game with his own studio. He announced one, cancelled it, then he announced another one which is still in development, but it looks like complete trite. I have no qualms about being partial about my opinions on this matter because the survival games genre is really a host of scams. Like, we are like marginally removed from Kickstarter scams, NFT scams. Like, yeah, there's somewhat of a product there, but generally it's mostly lies. If you want fulfilling and fun survival games, try Subnautica, try Project Zomboid, Sir You Are Being Hunted, The Raft, The Forest, The Long Dark, or Don't Starve. If you're willing to look around for a server style that suits your niche, then try DayZ Standalone or Rust with some friends, because they've become pretty excellent in both PvP and PvE, and you can also find roleplay servers on those games. I hear Scum is okay as well, but do extensive research before you get it, because I hear that one's pretty hardcore. The perfect modern survival game in my eyes is actually Valheim, which takes the hardcore stuff out and lets you just relax with your friends. But if you're in the market for something competitive like DayZ Mod once offered through its numerous offshoots, your best bet is probably Rust or DayZ Standalone. For me personally, the premise of that perfect survival game is still not fulfilled. Standalone is getting close, but until it has that AI complexity of Arma 3 at the very least, I think I'll stick to Arma 3 Exile, which is basically just DayZ Epoch less the zombies. The promise of a survival game that fits your niche is a lie that gets iterated with every new multiplayer survival game. There's always strings attached, and whether it's bad monetization, bad optimization, or the risk of abandonment, survival gamers are just chasing a high fulfillment that different games may or may not give them. In the process, they get scammed on a regular basis with every new flavor of the month game. Many games are just pitching to you things that you want to hear. They want to sell to you the nostalgia you miss about DayZ Mod, without half the heart or community. Some games are so vapid, I can't even remember their names. But survival gamers are a resilient bunch. They patiently await that special game that will one day arrive. The one true king of survival. The game that will finally be worth their time after they toil away at their busy 9-to-5s and all their other grinds. If I'm gonna lose 100 hours of my life to a game, hopefully, I have the clarity of judgment that it's a game that's actually worth my time because the devs care to patch the bugs, optimize the engine, and give the community the tools and the ability to transform the game into what they want out of it. If a game comes out that's essentially equivalent to DayZ Epoch on Arma 2, I'll be on that in an instant. Arma 3 Exile comes extremely close, and so does Rust with its world events and safe zones. But Rust isn't based on a military style game, and Exile servers tend to be too militarized. Though there's been some excellent servers on Arma 3, such as Finders Keepers, who has a great admin, and I hear there's a decent one on EU as well that replicates the DayZ experience as well. I guess I just want to have that perfect survival game. But the curse of being into survival games is that you have to be willing to put up with a lot of bad games while you wait. DayZ and Rust may be perfect for others, but not for me. I'm still holding out hope that someone makes a true successor to Epoch on standalone. That, or a game releases with a concept that's so well executed that I can love it on its own merits. I feel like on this point, I have more in common with the jaded MMO players that can enjoy WoW or FF14 that are waiting for that one game that fits the glove and they have to wade through crap like New World, Alien, Lost Ark. We're all waiting on that perfect game. And honestly, my advice is not to settle on the big multiplayer survival games. My advice is just to play something else. Play an old JRPG, play the Uncharted series, play the Master Chief Collection, play literally anything else. Because this game genre is not in its golden age at all. At least not on the side of hardcore unless you're really into Tarkov's format. It's not the conclusion many people want to hear. But it's the conclusion I've derived for myself. If you haven't owned DayZ or Rust, give them a try with some friends. Chances are you'll probably still have fun. Surely, with how many botched projects have been made then subsequently abandoned or left on life support, no game developer is going to be stupid enough to try their hand at the survival genre, right? When I have some free time, I'm going to make a sequel to this essay, and it's going to be called How DayZ Invented the Battle Royale Genre. But until that time comes, just know that this is the case. If you don't believe me, look up PlayerUnknown and look at his history. Hey guys, I just want to say this was my first ever video essay for YouTube, and I plan to upload at least 2 a month, maybe a bit shorter in length, but if you have any feedback about my enunciation or any other comments, let me know down in the comment section below. If you want to catch me on Twitch, I'll be at MeatmanTV. Same thing on Twitter. Anyway, thank you and see you next time. Bye.